Before Black Sabbath turned the sky black in February 1970, the storm had already started rumbling across Britain. The sirens were wailing in 67. The riffs were getting mean in 68. And by 69, the underground was shaking the walls with sounds that felt uncomfortably close to the metal that would dominate the next decade. Tonight, we're going under the floorboards. 10 tracks that rewired British rock before anyone called it heavy metal. Not the headline bands, the ones in the shadows where the fuse was actually lit. But the first warning didn't come from a guitar at all.
Buddy Baker was an ordinary guy, so when he got the letter he was horrified, but he said goodbye.
Sands, Listen to the Sky, 1967. It opens like a crisp slice of Carnaby Street pop. Harmonies, bright chords, swinging rhythm, the kind of single that should have earned them TV slots and teen mag spreads. Instead, the whole song gets hijacked. Air raid sirens fade in and never leave. The guitar turns into a fire alarm, and then the coda drops like a curtain of iron. A retooled Mars, the bringer of war. Holst's Martial Stomp, transplanted into a rock single 3 years before Black Sabbath. The date matters. So does the context. Sands were tied to NIMS and Reaction, and their release collided with Brian Epstein's sudden death in August 67, leaving a single that sounded like the future with nobody left to push it. The result? It sank. The influence didn't. That coda matters for another reason. Decades later, Geezer Butler and Tony Iommi pointed to Holst's Mars as the seed of Sabbath's signature riff. Pair that admission with Sands' doom-coded coda and you get a crisp through line. British rock was already flirting with ominous, processional heaviness by 67. We just didn't have the genre label yet. Listen for the moment the sunshine pop groove hardens into a march. The sirens don't decorate the coda, they force the rhythm. Gun. Race with the Devil. No preamble. Just a riff that leans forward like a motorcycle and refuses to let you breathe. It was a UK top 10 hit, which is wild when you realize how blunt and aggressive it sounds against its era. The guitars bark, the vocal barrels. It's not heavy metal yet, but the adrenaline is the same species. Even Jimi Hendrix noticed. He quotes the riff inside Machine Gun at the Isle of Wight 70. That's a Hall of Fame cosign. When the most inventive guitarist of the age drops your riff into his anti-war epic, the underground is officially above ground. Taste. Blister on the Moon. Rory Gallagher's first shot is all bad-tempered swagger and clenched jaw rhythm. Released as a single in April 1968, it didn't chart, but listen to the message baked into the performance. Stance, attack, friction. You can almost hear the genre boundaries snapping. British blues is mutating. The guitar is louder than the lyric, the groove is a shove, not a swing. We would hear this attitude again and again in metal, only with bigger amps and darker stories. Notice the rhythm guitar stuttering between beats. That nervous push becomes the gallop later bands would ride into the 70s. Hear how Rory leaves air between phrases. Those tiny silences make the riff feel heavier than the actual distortion. High Tide, Feudalists Lament. A band brave enough to make a violin scream back at a guitar. Tony Hill's riffs don't chug, they carve. Simon House saws across them like a buzzsaw through sheet metal. The recording dates, June to July 1969, put this 7 months before Sabbath's debut. The mood puts it closer still. No pastoral prettiness here. The violin is distortion and dread. If you want to show your audience how Doom sounded before Doom, this is your cut. Simon House would later join Hawkwind and perform with Bowie. His passing in May 2025 pulled High Tide back into the spotlight and reminded everyone how startling this sound was when it hit tape.
Take this bomb, drop it on old Hong Kong.
Blossom Toes, Peace Loving Man. Same year, different edge. The band that once specialized in kaleidoscopic pop returns with a July '69 album that sounds like the walls are closing in. The guitars feel heavier, the vocals more frayed, the whole performance tilted toward menace. It's the pivot that a lot of psychedelic survivors attempted in '69. Keep the experimentation, lose the whimsy, and let the amps do the talking. This cut does exactly that. The violin often shadows the guitar a fifth above, then saws against it. Dissonance you feel as dread. The chorus strains upward while the backing drops lower, melodic optimism wrestling a darker mix.
Take a drink from my magic potion, soon you're gonna really feel fine.
The Open Mind, Magic Potion. Released as a single in August 1969, it's a compact blast of fuzz bass, wah stabs, and pounding drums that doesn't meander for a second. You can call it heavy psych, freak beat, proto-metal, it doesn't care. Collectors have passed around lore that the BBC shied away from it for obvious reasons. The title doesn't hide its subject, and while that sits more in fan memory than official ledger, the point stands, this was too heavy, too brazen for daytime pop radio in '69. In other words, exactly the kind of song that grows into legend. Clock the drum accents on the and of 4. They shove the riff forward so the fuzz feels like it's sprinting. Edgar Broughton Band, Love in the Rain. Drop this inside Wassa Wassa, July '69, and you'll hear the moment where a bar band stomp becomes a confrontation. The guitar is all grit, the drums are a bar fight, and the vocal is practically foaming. It's not polished, it's not meant to be. That's the point. This is the unvarnished side of late '60s British heaviness. Less symphonic drama, more boots on the pavement. A lot of later metal with its love of the riff as blunt instrument lives in this DNA. Under the roar, the bass walks in stubborn steps. Refusing to swing is why the groove feels confrontational.
You taste the tender fruits.
Little free rock. Dream. 3 players, no safety net. Peter Illingworth's guitar tone has that glass edge bite, the kind that makes every bend sound like it's about to snap. The band cut 1 LP, 1969. Dream is where the fuzz blooms into a tight, forward-tilting attack. Everything is on the verge of feedback, but the hook never dissolves. It's the small room version of heaviness. No orchestration, no elaborate arrangements, just 3 people trying to overwhelm the walls. The lead tone is brittle on purpose. That biting pick attack at note onset is a proto-metal tell. Second Hand, Rhubarb, 1968. The album Reality gets called one of the earliest prog documents, but Rhubarb doesn't care about labels. It lurches, growls, and stamps harder than much of what prog would become. Call it proto-prog with a mean streak, or just call it loud. Either way, it's a key step in proving that complexity and heaviness were already cohabitating in London studios by '68. Andromeda, Too Old, 1969. John Ducan kicks the door open with a riff that feels like a ladder you climb and then jump from. The band had John Peel's attention and even Pete Townshend's interest in producing, according to band histories and reissue notes, clear signals that the right people heard how potent this was. Too Old plays like a draft for 1970s hard rock discipline. Riffs drilled tight, rhythms on a leash, and a sense that the song's engine is more important than any one flourish. When the meter shifts, guitars hang a fraction late. That lag adds weight without turning up the volume. Each turnaround trims a note from the riff. Subtraction tightens the spring so the next downbeat hits harder. Start with Sands in '67, War Sirens, Holst's Mars Heartbeat, and a doom coda nobody asked for, but everyone later recognized. Layer in 1968's Bite, gun flooring it into the top 10, Taste throwing elbows while the rest of Britain dials flowers into their lapels. Then 1969 turns the lights down. High Tide turns violin into a metallic rasp. Blossom Toes drop the day glow and pick up a scowl. The Open Mind compress heaviness into a single so sharp it draws blood. Edgar Broughton bring the fight to the front row. Little Free Rock show how loud three people can be. Secondhand and Andromeda prove that heavy and clever could be the same thing. And if you trace the Holst line from Sands to Sabbath, the riff lineage from Gunn to Hendrix to 1,000 metal bands, and the attitude from Taste's single to the decade that followed, you see the outline of metal before the name. This isn't about replacing the canon, it's about expanding it, giving credit to the rooms where the sound was actually mutating, and to the records that sold a few thousand copies but taught later bands how to sound dangerous. If the birth of metal was a moment in 1970, its childhood was right here. 1967 to 1969, loud, unruly, and already unmistakable. Love rock in all its shapes? Subscribe now for stories, riffs, and hidden gems.